The folklore and superstition of bats. This was suggested a while back, so I dove into the research. And while researching the folk tales of bats, it's given me a new appreciation of this unique and remarkable animal. And I found out the oldest fossils of bats are around 50 million years old. And as you probably know, these unusual creatures are associated with witchcraft, vampires, and the devil in Western society. And they're up there with snakes and spiders as creatures that give people zoophobia. But in reality, they're not that ominous. The UK is home to 18 species of bat, which are the only mammals that can fly. They also sleep upside down, navigate by echolocation to find food, and are often found resting in dark places. Now, this unusual nature of bats has caused them to be subject to folklore for millennia all over the globe, and their nocturnal habits and eerie appearance have granted them a special place in the realm of the supernatural. And bats have often inspired fear and fascination over the centuries, whether they appear as familiars to witches, vampires, or portents of death. And their inability to fit neatly into particular categories of creatures makes them all the more mysterious. But in ancient Egypt, bats were thought of a bit more positively. They were seen as a potential cure for a range of ills such as toothache and fever. They were also hung over doorways to prevent the evil spirits that carried the disease entering the homes. And the ancient Romans created a myth in which there was a battle between birds and mammals, and the bats wisely stayed out of the conflict and only picked a side when the god Mars declared that the birds were the winners. And the opportunistic bats then decide to support the birds. And then you have China, where bats are considered a symbol of happiness, good fortune, and blessings. In Chinese, the word for bat and happiness are both pronounced as a fu, F-U. And then in Fiji, they tell the story of how a rat stole the wings of a heron to become a bat. And Samoans have a similar fable. In southwestern India, the creation myth has the bat emerging from an unhappy bird that prayed to be like humans. And something went wrong, so that while bats got hair, teeth and other mammalian features, they remain mostly birds. But in British folklore, bats are often viewed as symbols of the unknown, and they symbolise rebirth, intuition and darkness. But bats are very misunderstood. And very often they're considered intangible creatures because they emerge from nowhere at dusk, seeming to exist between the world of light and darkness, travelling the margins between nature and spirit, which gives them that supernatural appearance, being able to move between different realms, and also thought to be the messenger between the living and the dead. There are at least 1,100 species of bats worldwide, and they can eat up to 1,200 mosquitoes an hour each. And as mentioned, they're the only mammals that can fly. They sort of flap their fingers, which are covered in skin, to move through the air. They also emit high-pitched sounds that bounce off objects and return to their ears, which I mentioned earlier, echolocation. And they can live for decades, unlike many small mammals. And they have very few natural predators. It seems they seem to symbolise modern-day Halloween supernatural energy. And bats entering your home foretells death. And this is probably partly why bats became closely identified with vampires. This began around the 16th century, and it was when vampire bats were discovered in the Americas and quickly became associated with the legends. And this association between bats and vampires remains central to folklore today. And when Bram Stoker's Dracula was published in 1897, the link was cemented. And of course, with Count Dracula transforming into a bat, the legend was made. In most of medieval Europe, bats were frequently considered to be familiars to witches and believed to assist them in their magical practices. In some places, it was thought that witches used bats to cast spells and deliver curses. Plus, their nocturnal habits of living in old dark places made them ideal companions as familiars. And then we have Shakespeare. He has the three weird sisters huddled around their cauldron mixing evil potions in Macbeth. Into their vile broth goes,
"Eye of newt and toe of frog, wool of bat and tongue of dog, adder's fork and blind worm's sting, lizard's leg and owlet's wing."
And this connection to witchcraft further cemented bats' reputation as creatures of darkness. Now, the bat's close link to Halloween traces back to ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. During this time, a veil is considered thinnest between the living and the spirit world, allowing supernatural beings to pass between them. And it was also a time when bats thought to be especially active. And the places they roosted, like caves and dark places, were seen as entrances to the other world, and the critters were able to traverse these realms. And seeing a bat during Samhain was thought to indicate the presence of a spirit or other supernatural being nearby. Now, many thought bats were the restless souls of the dead, particularly those who had died violently or without proper burial rites. These souls, unable to find peace, were thought to take on the form of bats, flying through the night in search of rest. And when seen in graveyards and old ruins, they were also considered to be the spirits of the unburied, which further associated them with death and the afterlife. Now, a persistent myth is that bats are drawn to human hair and can get entangled in it, as you often see in films. This belief likely stemmed from bats' erratic flight patterns, which made them appear to swoop towards people. However, bats have excellent echolocation and are adept at avoiding even the smallest obstacles. So this myth has no basis in reality. In many parts of rural Britain and Ireland, it is believed that killing a bat would bring bad luck or even a curse upon the family. Now, this belief stemmed from the idea that bats were creatures of the spirit world, and harming one would invite misfortune from the beyond. And bats were believed to possess powerful properties, particularly in their blood. And bat blood was said to be used in spells to grant invisibility or enhance magical powers. And in some folklore, it suggests that bats' wings or eyes could be used in charms to ward off evil or bring good luck. However, obtaining these items often involve gruesome rituals, adding to the bat's reputation as a creature tied to dark and dangerous magic. These varied beliefs show how deeply bats are entwined with human fears, superstitions and mystical traditions across Britain and Ireland and some parts of Europe.